All right, today we are diving deep into the core philosophy of one of the most famous personal finance books ever, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. At its heart, this book is really a story about two fathers and their completely opposite ways of thinking about money. So from a really young age, Kiyosaki was basically caught between two totally different worlds. His real dad, his poor dad, always used to say, "The love of money is the root of all evil." But then there was his best friend's dad, his rich dad, who had a totally different view. He would say, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." And that single, powerful contrast, that's the jumping off point for this entire mindset. So who were these two dads? Well, poor dad was Kiyosaki's actual father, a super smart, highly educated guy with a PhD who did everything right. He followed the standard path. And rich dad, that was his best friend's dad, an 8th grade dropout who somehow became one of the richest men in Hawaii. As you can imagine, their advice was night and day. And this is where you really see the split in how they saw the world. Poor dad's advice is what most of us hear, right? It's the path of climbing the corporate ladder. Go work for a company. But rich dad's advice was the total opposite. It was learn how money really works so you can own the ladder. The goal wasn't to go find a good job, it was to go out and create them. This idea highlights a huge mental shift that rich dad insisted on. He literally banned the phrase, "I can't afford it." He called it a sign of mental laziness because, think about it, it's a statement. It just shuts your brain down. But when you ask, "How can I afford it?" well, that's a question. It forces your brain to wake up and start searching for answers and opportunities. So picture this. Kiyosaki is just 9 years old, and he decides he wants to learn from Rich Dad. He goes up to him and says, "Can you teach me how to get rich?" Rich Dad agrees, but he makes it clear this isn't going to happen in a classroom. Oh no. The lesson was going to start with a job, and it was deliberately designed to be a little painful. And here was the job offer. Spend 3 hours every single Saturday dusting old canned goods in one of Rich Dad's stores. And the pay? A measly 10 cents an hour. Yeah, you heard that right. Even back in the 1950s, this was basically an insult. So after a month of this, giving up his Saturdays and missing softball games, young Robert was just furious. He felt totally used, like he'd been tricked into being cheap labor for a few dimes. He was convinced Rich Dad was a crook, and he was ready to go give him a piece of his mind. But when he finally confronted him, Rich Dad smiled and revealed the big twist. That frustration, the anger, the feeling of being overworked and underpaid, that was the first lesson. He explained that this is how life teaches you. It doesn't give you a lecture, it just pushes you around. And most people either quit or they push back at their boss, but they never realize it's life itself trying to get them to wake up. And then, just when you think it's over, Rich Dad takes it one step further. He says, "If you really want to learn, come back to work. But this time, I'm not paying you anything. Zero. Nothing." The entire point was to force him to break that mental connection we all have between working and getting a paycheck. The real learning could only start once the money was completely off the table. So, why all this drama? The 10 cents and then nothing at all? Well, Rich Dad was trying to show him the single biggest trap in modern life. It's a cycle that keeps most people working their entire lives and never really getting anywhere. He called it the rat race. And the pattern looks something like this. You get up, you go to work, mostly because you're scared of not being able to pay your bills. Then you get your paycheck and desire kicks in. You see all the cool stuff you can buy, so you pay your bills, you spend what's left, and then the fear comes right back, pushing you to get up and go to work all over again. It's just a loop run by two powerful emotions, fear and greed. Now here's the crucial part, the thing that trips everybody up. A bigger paycheck doesn't actually get you out of the rat race. In fact, for most people, more money just means more spending. A bigger salary leads to a bigger house, a nicer car, bigger credit card bills. The pattern just gets bigger and way more stressful. The problem isn't your salary. The problem is a lack of financial education. So how in the world do you escape this trap? Well, Rich Dad said it all boils down to understanding rule number 1. He believed this is the only rule you really need to know to build wealth. First up, an asset. Now, forget all those complicated definitions from accounting class. Rich Dad's rule is beautifully simple. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. That's it. It generates income for you. And a liability? Well, it's the exact opposite. It's anything that takes money out of your pocket. Simple as that. It all comes down to the direction the cash is flowing. And this one simple distinction creates two completely different financial lives. You see, the rich spend their time and money acquiring assets, things that make them more money, like businesses or stocks or income-producing real estate. The middle class, on the other hand, often spends their money on liabilities that they think are assets, things like their house or their car, which constantly take money out of their pocket every single month. Okay, so this brings us to the final big idea from Rich Dad. Once you really get the difference between an asset and a liability, the path forward becomes incredibly clear. You have to start minding your own business. And here's the key distinction he makes. Your profession is not your business. Your profession is what you do for a paycheck. You might be a teacher, a doctor, a mechanic. But your business is your asset column. Minding your own business means you are relentlessly focused on building that asset column. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, you keep your day job. That's what pays the bills and gives you capital. But instead of just spending more when you get a raise, you take that extra money and you buy real income-producing assets. You focus like a laser on building that asset column while keeping your expenses and liabilities as low as possible. And luxuries? Oh, they come dead last. The rich don't buy a fancy car with their salary. They buy an asset, like an apartment building, that produces enough extra cash flow to pay for the car. The asset buys the luxury. And that really leaves us with this one last powerful question to think about. Every day when you go to work, every dollar you earn and spend, is it primarily making your boss richer? Is it making your banker richer? Or are you deliberately taking a piece of that effort, a piece of that money, and diligently building a business of your own, brick by brick in your asset column? Because according to Rich Dad, that one question makes all the difference in the world.